welcome back.
Manitoba Power. I'm D.
I'm T.
Episode
16.
16. Excellent. Yeah. Nothing special about that number.
Sweet 16. Yeah, what the heck?
There you go. Now you got the candles.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. Sweet 16.
Happy birthday.
That was a glorious year.
Our podcast can drive.
Yeah. That's probably where I peaked. 16 was a good year.
16? Not for me.
Was it early or later?
I'm still waiting to peak.
You're still waiting for it.
The peak is still peaking. Still waiting. I'm hoping by 42.
Yeah, 42.
That'll be my year. So
yeah.
What do we got today? We got a coaching course.
Yeah, so we got the second set, 2 of 3 coaching course that already took place.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
When was that? Yesterday?
Yeah, it took place yesterday.
Perfect. Good attendance.
Great attendance.
Some great topics.
Great topics. Right? And something that doesn't really get talked about, so we'll kind of cover here.
Yeah.
Because I think we probably mentioned it probably once or twice in passing about like testing protocols, and I don't think we've really covered like supplements or anything like that thoroughly. But as if anyone has followed Manitoba Powerlifting in the last recent year, in the last like couple months, we did have a member that tested positive in a local meet in Manitoba.
Yeah.
So as part of competing, and when you register for a meet, there's a $15 portion that goes into testing.
Yes, and my thing, being in the sport for 10 years, I always said, is it really a tested sport if there's no testing at the local level? Yeah. And I was always like, we need more testing. Well, sure enough, it looks like we're getting more testing.
Or at
least athletes are being like, what happens? Like, I don't want to say like tattled on, but like, for what reason would they bring testing to a local level?
Yeah, some probably reporting. Because in the past, I know I have said maybe like 5 years ago, I would say like 5 to 3 years ago is most relevant, that I said like we're kind of sponsoring 5 lifters.
Yeah, no.
Whereas like all of our testing in like CPU went to testing like 5 people.
Yeah.
That were in like the testing pool. But and I always say as like to my athletes is like that's kind of the goal, is to get tested.
Yeah,
and like you're doing pretty good.
Like we all have to take that CCS program or CCS certificate that we have to show at every meet that shows that we went over the drug testing rules and like protocols and like the different pools and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's always seemed like CPU generates this massive amount of revenue for testing, and it's dedicated to a very small number of athletes who get tested like 6 to 12 times a year. And then the rest of us don't get tested. Example being, you did your first meet.
Yep.
You didn't get tested?
No. Even in weightlifting, I haven't gotten tested.
Wow. See, I just might be unlucky because I've been tested in like 3 sports.
There you go.
So I was tested at, I'll tell you right now, I had to look it up because I can't remember which event it was. I think it was 2023 regionals.
Yeah, in Brandon.
Yeah. And I don't know if I was just like selected because somebody else was being tested. But my coach at the time told me it had a lot to do with my content on social media and being associated with bodybuilding, and that the CCS has like a algorithm that is like, I don't want to say patented, but like proprietary.
Okay.
And we're not allowed to know how it works.
Proprietary blends in pre-workout.
Well, that happens too.
Sketchy.
Proprietary. Avoid proprietary blends.
Yeah.
But for some reason, because I'm associated with bodybuilding, drug-tested bodybuilding, and actually WADA level drug-tested bodybuilding, I was flagged, and then I was tested. Obviously, I had nothing in my system, which is the goal.
That's the ideal. Well, you have stuff in your system, but it's all good.
It's all good stuff. It's all good stuff.
They'll be like, this guy has enough caffeine to kill an elephant, but...
Yeah, and actually caffeine used to be on the banned substance list.
Yeah, that'd be tough to compete.
It's still on the watch list, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
But yeah, I think like going from the start of as an athlete, like you get a baseline knowledge of through competing that you're going to go through the CCES course.
Yeah.
So maybe you have a little bit more, and there's like drop down menus through the course that you can like get more information, whether it's
like the global
DRO, where you can look up stuff,
is your medication banned,
your
that kind of stuff?
medications and stuff like that. But as a coach, like you may not get that. Like
No,
you can come in absolutely blind of, you don't know, maybe you don't even, some coaches may not even communicate like what pre-workouts, what supplements is their lifter taking.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of not only protecting your athlete of like, hey, making sure that they're not taking a banned substance, but also protecting yourself as a coach.
Yeah. And the CCS certificate is something that's free that anyone could take. And I'm not, it's not unrealistic. We could see organizations make all the coaching, like certified or registered coaches take it, because I think we're hearing as executives or as board members that the CPU is implementing a coaching program nationally, and then we're implementing one provincially. Any other sport is going to have a set of certificates outside their coaching program you need to get. So like I wanted to, for instance, coach internationally. I had to do all these other like coach.ca courses in order to do that had nothing to do with the CPU or CCS or anything like that. It's very likely that there'll be a bunch of boxes you got to check just to be a coach.
Yeah.
On top of the CPU certified coaching program or the MPA coaching program. Things like it wouldn't be unreasonable to want a criminal record check or a sex abuse registry check if you're dealing with athletes under 18 or under 12 or whatever it is, because athletes can be as young as 8. So it makes sense that the CCS certificate would be something that coaches should have, at least to have a baseline knowledge of like what is banned, who gets tested, why would someone get tested, how do they get tested, what happens if your athlete gets selected and you're a coach and you're like, where's my athlete going? Right?
Yeah,
like you don't
or
know.
what does the coach do?
Like what's the coach do?
Yeah, sometimes in testing, they can, it can be selected from like the winner of a class, but it also can be like reported. The athlete gets reported, or it can be just completely random as well. So
I remember I walked off for my last deadlift at regionals, and there's a guy there, Joe, who I didn't know at the time, but now I know who he is, wearing a lanyard, which I didn't see. And he comes up, he's like, hey, Dino, and he shakes my hand. He's like, so I've just been waiting for you. And I'm like, oh man, that's cool. And I'm like walking away to my stuff. He's like, no, you're coming with me. And I was like,
who are you?
He's like, who are you? Like, what's going on? He's like, no, you've been selected for testing, and
you're like, yes,
you need to follow me. And I was like, oh man, cool. But like, why me? Like I'm not that good.
Well, that was, I've had, I think only one of my athletes get tested, and it was like back in, I think it was the 2021 provincials, and it was the right after like the pandemic when we didn't have like qualifying totals for provincials, and he bombed out his first meet, and then he went to provincials and got a total, and then he got tested that meet, and we were like, there was no provincial records or anything, but I think like his cousin was tested quite a few times and never tested positive, or I never failed the drug test or anything like that. It was just an incredibly strong guy.
Yeah.
So then he got tested. I think that was kind of like an association test. But he was clean, and but he was kind of confused of like, I squatted like 180 kilos, like didn't have like a record-setting meet by any means, but he's like, I just had a full meet. Why am I getting tested? But that's also a good part of it as like a member of an association that pays into those, like to see that like, hey, that money is cycling back, because those tests are expensive to have, like a WADA or CADA representative at a meet, and that meet was in. I think it was in Brandon or Portage, that one, at the military base.
Oh yeah.
So, so like to have them come out there, to come to a local meet is, and a provincial or regional level meet. Like we've had a couple. I think. Well, I know one for sure got tested at nationals, this past nationals that happened, and that was one of the top lifters in the nation, the
Yes.
top bench in the nation as well.
Right.
So yeah, it's just a matter of, you know, knowing what you're taking.
Yeah.
As a coach, knowing what your athlete is taking, and in the CCES course, like it won't walk you through like specific supplements or anything, but it's a lot on, it's the athlete's responsibility, right? So in terms of if you're taking a supplement brand that doesn't have, I think the like gold standards that like that green check,
Yeah, Safe for Sport, I think
safe
it's
for
called.
sport,
Yeah.
and it has like FDA approval or FDA substances in it.
Yeah, in Canada, what would that be? That would be
Yeah, it wouldn't be FDA. It would be
Health Canada. There's a little thing, but you can go to the website, the Health Canada supplement, Health Canada banned substances, because not banned drugs, banned substances. Because I remember like being a trainer my whole life, athletes come in, or even regular people will come in with like diet loss pills or like weight loss pills.
yeah.
And they'll have like ephedrine or something else in it that's like makes you lose weight like very fast. And like you can search these things on Health Canada's website, and it'll show you why they're banned or like when they were banned. And I remember things like there's this product in the early 2000s. It was called Hydroxycut.
Oh yeah. And it had a lot of ephedrine in it too.
Yeah.
So that's the thing too that I wouldn't say is tougher, but it's more of a responsibility of a powerlifter, because you could get hydroxycut, you can get ephedrine,
Yeah.
you can get all this at like any supplement store that you go to.
Store, exactly.
So it's just a matter of like, just because you get it at a place that you get the things with the green check mark, your protein that you're getting and stuff like that, doesn't necessarily mean that like you can take it for a sport and not test positive with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, they'll take all that into account, and they'll come up on a test of if it's in your system and stuff like that. But because there's certain things, I'm not sure if like the differences off the top of my head, but like in competition, out of competition, stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a good example would be something like cannabis.
Yeah, like marijuana.
In competition, but out of competition it's fine. So like you could smoke weed the week of your competition as long as your body can metabolize it well enough that you're not going to have an amount higher than the allowable threshold. And all these drugs have threshold limits that we don't know what they are.
Yeah.
But like it can be under a certain amount. But once it's over, then it's like obviously you're taking it for a performance benefit. And I always tell people, like, if you go look at the CCS list, 0 people on that list got banned for taking a supplement.
Yeah.
Right? Like they got banned for obviously taking at least one thing that was against the rules, if not a whole handful.
And that they know.
Yeah, and they know only doing it, hoping they can get away with it, right? Yeah. So, or hoping they don't get tested more than anything. Like most of them just assume they're not going to get tested, so they take these things. Whereas other people will take them knowing they could get tested, but they stop
administering.
Yeah, enough that the half-life or the washout period is long enough that it's not going to be in their system. So, to the average person, the average athlete, I always say, like, unless you're specifically taking something you know that's banned to get a performance benefit to be number one, essentially, like that's kind of the order.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's why when we break it down, I think that's, if you look at other sports like weightlifting. Yeah. Weightlifting had, and probably still has, a pretty big problem with drugs in their sport.
Yeah.
But there's that financial benefit of like national teams, Olympic medals. Like there's a lot of pressure financially in a lot of other countries that like, hey, if you don't win gold, like it's pretty much gold or bust.
Yeah.
For if it's a four-year period that you're training for and you don't get gold, like you just wasted kind of 4 years. So there's a lot more of that performance incentive to win and to take that stuff potentially. Whereas in powerlifting, like I would say like the incentive is to win, but like the financial side of it is like if you take a banned substance that's expensive, it just adds to your cost. Because
But I think that
Yeah.
I think we see people doing this in powerlifting to establish themselves as number one in order to
Yeah.
leverage it for coaching or leverage it for something else, right?
Mhm.
Like there is a monetary incentive. It's just less direct. It's like you're not going to win a prize, but if you repeatedly have the highest deadlift in the province, like
Mhm.
people are going to want to train with you because you're the best at something,
Yeah.
right? Like so, there is an incentive there financially. It's just it's that cost benefit. Like people obviously weigh like
Yeah.
the cost benefit of like I'll take something that could be bad for my health, but will help me perform, right? Or if it comes out, it could be bad for my reputation. But they weigh that against the fact that like I could also increase my revenue. I could set myself as being number one. I
Mhm.
could be an expert. Like there's so many of these other benefits that they think
Mhm.
outweigh all the risks, right? So
And that's the toughest part is just like when if and when ideally if you're taking a substance and then it comes back
yeah,
that you test positive, like the downfall of that in
yeah,
terms of like
yeah,
what happens to a lifter's reputation. We've seen like in past
yeah,
just seeing the unfortunate flip side of it of having like a national level lifter like test positive and then just a fallout of uh, like that lifter as well as it doesn't it does it mostly I think like nationally like a lot of coaches directors and stuff like that really and provinces just look at the lifter themselves as
mm-hmm.
opposed to like the province or the country.
Yeah,
I would say a lot more in powerlifting, but I know like in weightlifting aspect, it's a lot more of like these countries during these years were probably doping pretty severely, like the Bulgarians and stuff like that, and you go through that kind of spurt of it, and certain nations testing positive during more, but or having some golden boys, golden girls of weightlifting in that sense, and we haven't had too many like golden boys, golden girls fall in powerlifting. We had one, I think, back in like 2017, 2019 with like Kelly Branton.
right. Yeah,
But yeah, kind of, I think powerlifting does a good job just kind of putting the onus back on the lifter and not really taking, whether it's a province or the nation, they kind of just put that responsibility on the lifter of like it was that lifter's decision.
yeah,
Like they made that. And that's just a matter of in terms of as an athlete. So if you're especially say with like a pre-workout that's very common for people to take, I know in the CCS course it tells you to buy two. So it has like you have the lot number and the same lot
oh
number if
yes,
you go
right, right,
through
right,
it.
right, right,
But
right.
like
Yeah,
hey, if you're buying if you're taking a pre-workout on meet day, likely is that you have like ideally you have the exact same pre-workout, so like the last scoop and then you throw it away.
yeah,
But like all the supplements, because they're going to ask you all the supplements that
yes,
you're
yeah,
taking
yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff like that. So you gotta like my list is pretty simple. It's like creatine, protein, and pre-workout.
yeah,
So like my list is pretty like it's three. So
yeah.
for me to get lot numbers from that, I was just like,
And my thing was like when they asked me because I was surprised and I had to sit there and then I was like, okay, protein, yeah, okay, pre-workout, yeah, caffeine pills, okay. I was taking like omegas, vitamin D, like, and the
whoa,
list
whoa,
goes on
whoa.
and on and on and on. And then I'm like, oh, and then, oh, we're sick too, right? So like, I took Dayquil like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I took Nyquil Tuesday,
Mm-hmm.
Thursday. I have allergies, so I took what's that called? Reactin,
Yeah.
right? So then you're going on, you're like, holy shit, I actually took like
You're a pharmacy.
20, 30 things in the
Yeah.
last, because they ask you, I think it's the last week or the last 2 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, but yeah, I always tell people like this, we're the kind of person that doesn't need to worry because like the people that get sanctions are the ones that are actually intentionally taking something.
Yeah.
Like none of these people on this list were like, oh, I went to Popeyes and I took like a pre-workout that had something
Yeah.
in it. Like they could, and
Mm-hmm.
like we've seen that in the past, but it's happening less and less, especially with the fact that like drugs are so easy to get online, SARMs are easy to get online.
Mm-hmm.
Like people can get that stuff and then all of a sudden um, get the result they want versus like thinking they're going to get it from the pre-workout. Like
Yeah.
right?
Or
Like,
just playing like the long game.
yeah,
And I think powerlifting is very much like a long game.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, because then, especially from like, um, you can be a very competitive sub junior.
Yeah.
And like win a national title, and then
Yeah.
the next year not even qualify.
Oh, 100%.
And then from junior, you can be a very competitive junior, and then the next year, once you age in the open, not even podium.
Yeah.
Like you could win a junior championship and then not podium the next year in open.
Mhm.
So then it's just a matter about like that 3 to 4 week or 3 to 4 year span of like training, podium, national champ, and then like the next year being like 10 to 20th ranked, and then in the next 2 to 3 years podium, and then
Yeah.
that cycle continuing. So it's definitely like the strongest lifter lifts the longest, or the
Well,
lifter that lifts the longest is the strongest, kind of,
yeah.
in the most cases,
And this
right?
isn't like any of us are making it to like the NHL of powerlifting. Like,
Yeah.
nobody's making money on powerlifting. It's
Well,
all the
that's
other things that,
yeah.
that we can do. Well,
Well,
Keystone.
some people
are
can make
making
money, yeah,
Okay.
but
But like most of us will not. You have
yeah.
to love powerlifting.
hmm
And most of us are in powerlifting because we're in fitness or we
Mhm.
like to work out. So
Yeah.
like abusing drugs that might have negative consequences down the road, especially if you have to do it your whole life, because like a lot of these things, once you start, you're probably going to have to continue it.
Yeah, some
And
sort
less
of
because of your body, but more because of like, I've been in fitness for like 26 years now. The guys that started taking stuff had to continue taking stuff less for their health and the fact that things weren't working right, and more for the fact that like once you could bench 405, you're not going to
yeah.
want to like stop taking things and only bench 315,
Mhm.
right? So like ego has a lot to do with what drives people to do these things.
Yeah.
And a lot of the best athletes have to check their ego and know that like progress takes a lifetime.
Yeah.
And powerlifting is a lifetime sport. Like I'm still getting stronger 26 years after I started lifting, and very slowly, but I'm still getting stronger.
Mhm.
But I've had the ability to stay in this sport because I haven't messed with anything that could make me sick or mess with my head or anything like that. So
Yeah, and that's
um,
like by virtue, and that was kind of my point of like the financial incentive is like it's. I think you had a good point of like it could be coaching if it is a coach or an athlete that wants to get into coaching. There definitely is that there can be that aspect of it of like, okay, if I get better results, maybe I'll get more athletes or
yeah,
something like that. But maybe it's not a lifter that does that, and it's like, okay, well, by winning, then you actually have to pay more money because then you're going to these world meets.
yeah,
So there's it's kind of almost a flip side of
yeah,
like the better you do is great in powerlifting, of like you get to go bigger meets, but then the financial cost and responsibility to go to those bigger meets is that financial aspect of it.
yeah. Like to go to Worlds, it's like at least 3, 4, 5 grand,
Yeah.
right? Like you're not like you could get a couple sponsors, but like that's still not going to cover your trip,
Yeah.
right? Like it's a big amount of money.
hmm
Um,
And
yeah,
then so that's where it's, and somebody that's like hasn't taken any banned substances, that has been working like uh, years on years just compiling those results, and then for a person that has been taking banned stuff, just to take that away from them.
yeah. That's sad.
That's
I do remember seeing after Worlds in Mongolia, one of the guys, I think M2, I don't remember his name. I don't remember what weight class, 105 or 120 or something. He ended up winning, and then yeah, he was sanctioned, and that's on your record. Like
yeah.
you got to deal with that. It said like DQ next to them on open powerlifting,
hmm
right? Like I can't imagine the shame that comes with doing that. The other thing is like because people are coaches and because their business relies on the fact that they're in a drug tested sport. And we should mention that every one of the sports where people get tested
yeah.
has an untested counterparty. So
Mhm.
like you could just compete in another organization that's
Yeah.
untested, but you chose to be in the tested one. And like for instance, for me, I'm a natural bodybuilding coach
Yeah.
and athlete and a CPU, MPA, IPF athlete and coach.
hmm
My athletes know that one, I've been drug tested in both sports. I've competed at high levels in both sports, and my athletes do the same. If I was to be sanctioned or one of my athletes were to be sanctioned, that would completely ruin my business or
Yeah.
my image or my respect or trust.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's
So,
like even if you get uh like if you test positive in say powerlifting, and that's a CCES,
Mhm.
then that's going to affect, you're going to get sanctioned in not only powerlifting, but all those other
Yeah,
sports. So if your job and career works around handling or working with other sports of teams that have testing protocols, like hockey, for example, you'll have that exact same sanction.
Exactly.
So it's definitely a more encompassing, like kind of like big picture, even though it seems like a part of the sport that I think like probably prior to 2012 when it was mostly equipped, that was like kind of the like an order lift weights, obviously you're taking something and stuff like that, whereas now we just have, through the sport growing, you got better athlete pool, you got better athlete poll of, now we have just stronger people, and like gifted people that are competing in the sport, that aren't taking stuff, that are getting tested, that aren't having those positive test results, which is great. And they can continue to get stronger and represent Canada at these bigger stages. So it's not that it's a big part of the sport, but it's a part of the sport that is like a history of the sport. And in terms of newer lifters coming in that see those big weights and that immediately want to get into training and hitting those numbers, there can be that incentive to it. Obviously, that performance aspect, but in terms of just doing the due diligence of researching it for themselves, seeing and talking to lifters that like have been tested or know the testing parameters and stuff like that. I know in CCES it says talk to your athletic therapist.
There you go. We know one.
You can talk to me.
Talk to Tommy.
Yeah. What I've got, I know like in the program, like when we work with teams, there's like the telltale signs of like taking anabolics, and with I think it's a lot more maybe the feedback with powerlifting could be a lot faster. Like, okay, they went from benching like 275 to now they're benching like 400. It's like, what magical, like I want that program, right? Because I went from like in the last 5 years, I went from like 340 to like 355.
Yeah, no, I have a transformation video for my bench where it was like, it was 10 years between. And it was like benching 315 for like 5. And then it was benching 315 for 5, but like with better technique.
Yeah. And maybe like I'm not and maybe like we're not the example, because there are people that like, and I have benched like 172. So so I have had that like aspect of it where I have had that, but in terms of like getting it in training and then getting it onto a platform and stuff like that. So on a powerlifting side, it may be a lot quicker that you can get that result, or you can see like, hey, maybe there is some goofy stuff going on here. Whereas like in a sport atmosphere, it can be a lot more hidden, like in hockey, for example, right? And it's not just a performance enhancer like anabolics, it could be other things, right?
That weight loss, energy, recovery. There's so many other options. Like I was looking at the banned substance the sanction list, and for different sports, there's different things people get popped for, right? So like the obvious things are anabolics, and we'll see that in almost every sport. But like this guy got sanctioned from broomball for taking cannabis. So like,
be careful in broomball.
Like, bro, you're out for 5 years for broomball.
Yeah, that's like, tough,
right? Like,
but even like Lance Armstrong, like EPO and stuff like that, and like some sports like cycling, like there was I can't remember that documentary that got put out, but there's a lot of documentaries that you can go through. That
was like Icarus or something. Or?
Yeah, I think that was Icarus.
Yeah.
Or Icarus, was that Lance, or was that anabolics as a whole that it went through? But I think that was like Russia,
right,
and stuff like that. But there's a lot out there. So it's just like with the age of information, that there's a lot out there on all aspects of like whether it's training techniques or programs, but there's also a lot with like, say, availability to access like banned substances. So
I always tell people, like, they did a study on anabolic steroid use in the early 2000s in gym settings. So like just average people that go to the gym, and they already knew that 30% of women had tried an anabolic steroid or something that was banned, and like 54% of men.
Yeah,
and that's just regular people. That's not people trying to be
one
the
in
best
every
at
two.
Something. Well, that's not people trying to be the best at something, right? So like, that can go two ways. People that aren't trying to be the best at something want a shortcut. So the people that are dedicated and disciplined, maybe there's a lower incidence, so maybe
Yeah.
they don't take it. But it could be the other way. It could be like we could see more of it because people are more competitive, right?
Yeah.
And this was like, I think the study was like 10, 15 years ago because it's 2025.
Yeah.
So like, oh, it could even be 20 years ago now. I know they did they had stats on like Master Worlds in like 2004,
Mm-hmm.
and like something like half of the athletes they tested positive.
Yeah. Well, I think even in the Olympics, it was. I don't think there was probably a positive test rating, but I want to say like it was in the 30 percentile of like Olympic testing was dedicated to weightlifting. Like
Yeah.
the athlete pool of weightlifting to like all of the Olympics is
Yeah.
like less than 5%, I want to say, and they're like we're gonna focus here to see what happens.
Well, and that's interesting because we know every sport at the top level
Has something.
has something.
Yeah.
Like darts has like beta blockers,
Yeah.
right? And like
Or decathlon or something
yeah,
like that. Yeah.
ADHD medication. Like there's
Yeah.
things that people will take in every, like poker, beta blockers,
Yeah.
right? Like stuff like that where like can be reduce heart rate, reduce anxiety, reduce stress, so that people can concentrate, like
Mm-hmm.
sit for prolonged periods of time. So like when you're trying to be the best at something, there are going to be people that find shortcuts, but like the incentive in our sport to do something like that is so low
Yeah.
that like
And that's like what we probably touched on a lot about it, like probably in earlier ones, is like with myself, like even if I've trained like the powerlifting movements,
yeah,
it's like I'll be training just because I love the process of training.
Yeah.
But like whether there's a meet or not, or I'm training for a meet or
Yeah.
not, like I'm still going to be training that way.
yeah,
So it's just a matter about, I think it's good to have a lifter that just like loves pushing themselves,
Yes. Yeah.
and then when a meet comes, they broadcast like the results that they've had, as opposed to like really focus on the incentive of like whether it's records or stuff like that. Because if a lifter just focuses on like things that they can't control,
Yeah.
and like the intrinsic of like their recovery, their training, and like kind of those life stressors, if they can't control that,
Yeah.
then the byproduct of that will be getting those goals.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of just creating that like intrinsic environment that like they need to take stuff.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, I agree,
Mhm.
100%. Well, the biggest thing is our sport has a constant way to measure success,
Mhm.
and like if we can focus on our own success, and that's what I always think, anyways. Like if I can just keep getting better, I'll eventually be the best.
Yeah.
In my head, like that's how I look at it. Instead of being like I have to be the best
Yeah.
and do whatever it takes to be the best, it's like if I can just check my ego and say like
1% every day.
like I'm not that
Yeah.
I'm not my best. So like
Mhm.
what can I do to get better? Like
Mhm.
what can I do to get closer to a 700 total or whatever it would take to podium?
Yeah.
Versus like just thinking I have to win, right?
Yeah.
Because I have time. Like I still have 8 more years in M1. Like I can eventually get to the top. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So where can people find more information about whether it's if you're on medication?
Yeah.
There's the global draw.
Yeah, so I'd say like I always suggest if you're a coach or an athlete interested in competing, like just do the CCS course,
Mhm.
ccs.ca. If you access it from the CPU website, it'll take you to the right place. If you click on anti-doping, you choose your province, and it'll get you through the course, and then you
Mhm.
get a certificate. It's worth knowing, especially if you're a coach. And they give you resources like you mentioned, the Global DRO, which is basically you select what type of an athlete you are, what sport you're in, what nation. You can search for any substance, and it'll tell you kind of what the rules are, whether it's in competition, out of competition, ban, and then like what the amounts are. A lot of times, something, for instance, like cough medication will have pseudoephedrine in it,
Mhm.
which is banned at above a certain amount, right?
Yeah.
So like you could take Sudafed or whatever if you're sick, but like if you're popping it for weight loss, it's going to be very obvious because
Yeah.
the levels are going to be very high
Mhm.
in your system. So
Just don't be a sick puppy before me.
oh man,
Mhm.
yeah. Well, try having kids, and
Yeah.
you're always sick, and then you're always sick at meat. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, I guess if people want more information about athletes that have been sanctioned, you can definitely check out the Canadian Anti-Doping Registry. And that'll list every athlete within all the sports that CCS tests, kind of what their name is, their sex, the sport, which substances were found, when their sanction ends, and then you can actually look at the statement the athlete made or the investigator made, and then any like case
notes and
stuff like that, because it is treated very much
like an investigation,
an investigation, like a legal thing, right? So it's very
thorough,
by the book,
yeah,
which is good. So yeah,
all right, there we go.
So we learned a little bit about some stuff today. I guess we should mention if people have questions, or if they want us to talk about something, or if they need clarification about rules, like we have that phone line.
We have the phone line. Drop and with the phone line too, because I think there is some apprehensive with like if they send it and like their voice.
Oh, then people know who it is.
Then people know who it is, or and it's not as anonymous, so we'll like dishevel the voice up.
Yeah, we can even just like one of us could read it.
Yeah,
put the transcript up.
We'll put the transcript up. We'll kind of throw some spooky sensors over the voice so it doesn't sound, so you can't determine like the gender of the person or whatever.
Yeah.
And that being said, like it can be whatever. So I'll drop one of it right now.
Drink some milk, Gino. Drink all of the milk.
That we got.
Thank you, appreciate it. But yeah, and we're getting messages. Like I get DMs all the time. Like, hey, people love the podcast. People like being shouted out when they go like 9 for 9 at a meet, or like if they do well and they
8 for 9 and they're a
8
host.
for 9 and they're the host, so they only get mentioned by nepotism.
Yeah, damn right. Gotta get mentioned somehow.
Yeah, or you go, I think I went 7 for 9, and then we spent like half an hour talking about it.
You gotta.
Yeah,
you gotta.
But yeah, it's good.
But yeah,
we got her done.
Got her done.
Episode 16.
16 in the books.
Sweet 16.
We'll see you next week.
Hey,
also get your tickets for Keystone. I know you're wanting to, but you should get them now.
Right here.
You can get them right there. See you next week. It's caught in the crossfire. It's caught in the